It's my great pleasure to be here, really, and I love these topics, so it's lovely to be here and to get to share these ideas with you. I've been thinking about this for a long time. So I want to start with technology. And so it was technology that made car sharing possible, right? We made it, you could make a reservation in 30 minutes for a specific car, get in. It was really technology that made that so simple. It was technology that are making the whole the transit apps possible. And we know from a mobility standpoint, that really has been life transforming, that I'm now able to take a bus in Berlin, and 10 years ago or 15 years ago, I would never have figured that out. It's technology that is enabling e-hailing and ride-sharing for good or for ill in its positive and negative senses that is making that possible. So I really love the fact that technology has made sharing easy. It has profoundly been doing that. And sharing, for the most part, is good. And so, for example, these numbers, these are from Susan Shaheen, a beloved colleague of ours, so these are good numbers, that for every shared car, it takes out 12 personal cars, so enormously reducing the demand for parking. And I also want to say, because it'll tie in later, it also changes your decision to drive from a marginal cost one to a full cost one, so it has a double improvement on how and why we choose that mode, choose to take a car. And ride sharing, there's a lot of contestation around ride sharing. Does it work? Are people actually sharing or pooling the cars, as Dan would call it? But what we know is if we can get people to pool in the cars, it is a huge reduction on congestion, right? So if we can get any number of that to happen, it is only a good thing. And what I love about the ride-hailing apps is it's teaching people, I take out my phone and I can go from here to there and buy a seat, and one day there'll be 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 people buying a seat with you. So it's a really wonderful behavioral change that people are getting used to doing, a routinization of a behavior. So sharing is also good because I was in DC in January at a Transforming Transportation conference where they announced the Sustainable Urban Mobility for All, and it has four principles. And when I was there, I realized, wow, these 4 principles are all, if you just focus on sharing, are it. So if you want to have more equitable transport, if you do sharing, it's more equitable because it's cheaper transport. If you want to have more efficient transport, if you focus on sharing, we're getting more people in that car, or that car is being used many more hours of a day, so it's more space efficient. If you want to have clean cars, we know that when you are using a vehicle intensively, the economics are profoundly ones where you will choose an electric car because it's cheaper to refuel and cheaper to maintain. So if your vehicle is being used intensively, it will be electric. So sharing, again, as the thing. And last, safe. And this, I'm going to say, is kind of, I needed to make it work, but we do know that the accident and injury and death rates in shared transport is way less than the accident and injury rates in personal cars, categorically. So if we can shift the frame of reference from doing everything for people's personal private car owners and just say, remember one thing, let's move to enunciating and sharing and going after shared transport as our means of how we're designing our cities and our countries. So we have this brand new technology that is coming. Autonomous vehicles, how incredible. And so how can we optimize the best side of this? And what I love about it is in its best versions, it is going to give us the opportunity to completely do over cities. Like, it's so exciting to me. And I want to say that is the thing that gives me the most optimism right now, and I will share some of that optimism, but only if we work at it. So I'm not going to show you today because I was told not to. I would urge you all to go to YouTube, Google Robin Chase self-driving cars, and this is a 4-minute video that does very concisely the heaven-hell trajectories that we have ahead. But I will just keep going. So it's heaven-hell, Robin Chase. So done right, we could have cities like this. And this is a wonderful example that I'm just going to remind you. This is the Chungcheon River in Seoul, and it used to be 12 lanes of highway. And that mayor decided he was done with 12 lanes of highway, and he ripped it off, uncovered the stream that was underneath, and brought it back to this beautiful shape. So if we had shared vehicles for autonomous vehicles, as the ITF reports have been showing, we would only need 10% of the cars we have today. So I just want you to imagine Berlin with 10% of the vehicles. Your personal neighborhood with none of that on-street parking. What we could be doing with reshaping how we live and feel in cities, which I will add is where all of humanity is moving. So we need to make cities great. And so what can we deliver? So the mobility mode of delivery in order to get this has to be, as I said, a focus on shared transport. The urban form would be completely transformed because we want it to be compact and urban. As I said, we'll have this brand new streetscape that we can imagine because we only need to accommodate way fewer of those moving metal boxes. With energy, we have to address that, and this is our opportunity to address that. The energy that we're putting into these vehicles needs to be decarbonized and resilient. Labor, what I actually quite like about this, and I won't be talking about it today, this will be my only time to talk about it, is when autonomous vehicles come, and I believe in cities it's going to happen much sooner than later, it is going to force a national conversation and a planetary conversation about what is the social contract with labor. Because we're going to have this enormous disruption where a lot of people lose their jobs in short order. What should we all be doing about that? So I'm saying in a politically polite form, this will refresh the social contract with labor. We will all have to have big discussions on this topic. For data, we need this data to be open and standardized. All of our travel is now being digitized. Who's owning that? A couple of companies are owning and privatizing all of our data. We really need to get after that. And the EU's new data rules will be fantastic and are great guidance for the rest of the planet. Tax revenues is going to force us to have to rethink how we've been getting money to pay for infrastructure, or for cities and states and provinces that are getting a huge amount of money from parking. If we manage to pull this off, there will be no revenue from parking because people will not be parking. These vehicles will be used all the time. And we know if we get them to be electric, we know that fuel taxes, we won't be having any fuel taxes. So we need to rethink how we're dealing with tax revenues, and because we want to do it in time, we will be transitioning, starting today, to real-time user fees. And what's lovely about real-time user fees is they're dynamic and they cause me to consider which way I want to travel each time I get in the car. And so pricing, and I'll be talking about this later, we really need to get fair user fees across all modes. And I'm just going to skip that now and come back to it. So a lot of you are no doubt filled with skepticism. Robin, your whole idea about this beautiful nirvana of heavens with self-driving cars, I don't believe it. You should, because we already live in transport hell. It's not as if what the status quo is today is great. The status quo is terrible. We have incredible congestion. We have huge inequalities. We have, I will go through it right now. I could just stick on this slide, but I will keep going. And what is most of our transportation hell due to is because we've been underpricing most of the problems we experience in transportation today. And so part of what I want to impress upon all of us is we profoundly have to address the root underpricing problems in transport, because when autonomous vehicles come, and as Dan comes out and says, it's going to be 10 cents a kilometer, oh my God, 10 cents a kilometer, we have to, and that, as we know, doesn't count for any of those negative externalities, so to say, autonomous vehicles free of the cost of the personal time of either a paid driver or my personal time of driver. Dan talks about all the things I'm going to be doing in the car. I will be taking showers and doing yoga exercises and reading the internet. I'm really afraid of vehicles with no one in them. Any errand I have, go do that. Rush hour, I don't care. We will be warehousing inventories on our streets because it's cheaper to have the stuff float around, and it's happening today. Amazon is doing 2-hour delivery, and when there's an autonomous vehicle with 2-hour delivery, our streets will be filled with inventories of cars, inventories of goods and cars. So when we take out those drivers, every single thing we hate about transportation today will be magnified. All of those problems that are due to our underpricing are now going to get worse. So while we have definitely not wanted to touch this, we profoundly have to start talking about underpricing. And if you don't think that autonomous vehicles are coming in 3 years, but you think it's coming in 30, you haven't lost anything. You're still addressing the core fundamental problems that are making our transportation system terrible today. So what I learned when I was doing Zipcar is that when you're a person, and particularly if you think about going to university, am I going to drive to some place? And you'll say, what's the cost of that trip? That is the only thing you're considering. What is the cost of that trip? What are the cost of tolls? What is the cost of fuel? And what we know is, what is the cost of the trip going to be? 10 cents a kilometer. And so what do we get? We have free air pollution. And I love this little set here, which is Delhi 2016, and here's LA 2014. So why can people pollute my personal air where I am breathing, where we have the most cars and the most humans in cities, and we can't seem to be able to address this issue? Free or almost free on-street parking. It is a travesty in every dense urban area that anyone is able to park on street in their dense urban area for very close to free, and certainly not the price you would pay if an apartment were built there. Like those 120 square feet, or however many square meters that is, 8 square meters, for free. Like, it's a crazy thing. Free travel during peak times. Mind-boggling. And today, increasingly, free access to curbs for pickup, drop-off, and delivery. And so if we're moving from getting revenue from parking in congested areas where there's contestation of that curb, we need to start charging people by the minute to be using that curb. And I would like to charge it for UPS, for the delivery truck, for Robin getting in and out of her taxi or her shared car. Let's make the same price. And so if you think you're going to be parking there, that is a crazy idea. So what if we had fair user fees across all modes? I was just thinking that as a person who tried to do a company that was real ride sharing, one of the challenges of me doing a company with real ride sharing was that all of the air pollution reductions, all of the congestion reductions were not in my business. I was getting none of that in my business model. So cities didn't seem to care. So if we think of all the shared bikes, those people are getting they have to build their business model without this huge asset that they are providing. If we had fair user fees across all modes, it would level the playing field between walking, biking, Robin in her personal car by herself, 7 people in a shuttle bus, or mass transit. It would now make a level playing field. Today, we don't have that level playing field. And so, this fair user fees across all modes is, in fact, number 7 of something that I've been working really hard on over the last while, which is these shared mobility principles for livable cities. And so about a year ago now, I was being tortured by the fact that there's a lot of good ideas out there, and there's a lot of declarations, and there's a lot of activity that's doing great activity, but we need to have a single message. We need to cut through the noise. And so all of these NGOs sat down every 2 weeks for 7 months and crafted what did they think were shared principles that we all were in agreement of. And so here are these principles quickly. I'm not going to go through them right now, but you can go see sharedmobilityprinciples.org, and you can find them. And you can see that number 7, seek fair user fees across all modes, is one of those things. So for the rest of what I'm talking about today, I'm going to pluck out some of these shared mobility principles to talk through with you. So pollution. Shared mobility principle number 6. We need to transition to zero emission and renewables. And this is not Beijing when it's twilight, or Beijing and it's about to snow. This is Beijing 10 a.m. on a day I was there. It was unbelievable. Having lived in New England, I know what it feels like when it's about to snow at 10 a.m. Okay, so what if we had to encourage efficient use of space and assets? Number 3, this one is very dear to my heart. So you guys, in the transportation sector, I hope you've all seen this 100 times and you're hugely amused by it. I love this one. On Twitter, I found this. Here's what is Uber. Here's what is autonomous vehicles. And indeed, if all we do is just do the status quo and call it Uber, or just do the status quo and call it autonomous vehicles, what did we gain? This is the hell version. And I did find, because I love these, this was another version that when I talk to non-transportation people, I say, oh my God, look at that congested highway. Let's do an elevated highway on top of that. This is the reality. And what's beautiful about this reality is that it's matching it's statistically correct. 70% of those cars have 1 person in them. And so we have to get away from this. So going back, I can't go back, but my shared principle is cities need to make efficient use of vehicles and roads and curbs and sidewalks and their assets. And right now we are not making efficient use of them. And this is a picture, I think this is Bogota. And this is the number of people in all of those vehicles. And so those people that are in those minivans with 30 people in them, minibuses, it is grotesquely unfair that they are stuck in this traffic. So coming back to these fair user fees across all modes and making good use of our assets, it's killing me. And so we have to do a lot more sharing and get those user fees right. This was a picture of Market Street in San Francisco from my friend who did this work. And he's now pushing per city block. He's getting 40 people per block in the bus lane, 20 people per block in the bike lane, and 12 people per block in the car lane. So if cities are prioritizing people, not vehicles, which is another principle, we would be doing more of this work. And I had to throw this in, so we have this great BRT running down the middle, and look what's going down the side. It is still, like we did half the step, it's great, but we still have all those single occupancy cars who are able to run with their one person in their 7 square meters without being charged at peak times. If I think about this future, what I know for sure is that we need to be going towards a continuum of shared services. So I will have my multimodal life, I'll be taking all these modes, and in the motorized zone, it will be a continuum of vehicles, and if I'm an incredibly rich person, I'm going alone in my big, huge vehicle that has the leather seats and the whiskey closet, and I'm paying a fortune, or I'm going in a shuttle bus and I'm one of 7 people and I bought a seat, or I'm going on bus rapid transit in a lane that's whatever. So it's a continuum of these things, and we need to start thinking that is the future. We need to start in getting there. In order to get to this place, we have this inadequate data standards to support this new pricing, and I would say on the previous slide, let me just go back, we also have inadequate data standards for both subways and these personal cars. So if you think of Uber and Lyft and DE, they know Robin's actual point of origin and Robin's actual destination and how many seats there are in that car, and I'm making my basis on that. Transport today is going to have a really hard time competing with that, because what do they know? My station of origin, my station of leaving, and I could be standing in a really packed train and not get a seat and never know about it. We need our transit services to get with the program and start telling me how many seats are available on that bus. Is it a congested one or not? Where does Robin actually want to go so I can change my bus routes and start doing more dynamic pricing? If we want to create this continuum, we have to up the game also in the transport sector, in the transit sector. So number 8, public benefits via open data. I was struck, because I'm now becoming more informed, I'm constantly trying to get myself informed, there are no mapping standards for curb and lane use. If you think of GIS and all the beautiful mapping we do, today there is not a way that says, if I look at this curb, there is a fire hydrant here, no one can park here, this is loading zone, this is parking. All of that mapping doesn't exist. And so when cities want to move towards what is my inventory of parking, most cities cannot tell you what the number of on-street parking spaces they have. They don't know how much space is being given to whatever is being given to. They have no inventory of this. So there's an NGO I've been working with called the Open Transport Partnership that is doing this mapping together with NACTO, the World Resources Institute, CAF, a Development Bank, and the World Bank. So they're starting to map this so that we can get to this place where we can start doing this dynamic pricing. Just going through a few more, we need to engage the stakeholders in this decision making. So this is, drivers revolting because of Uber, and I think that's a fine revolt. Just imagine what it's going to be like, though, when we go to autonomous vehicles. And because I profoundly believe that the movement to shared electric autonomous vehicles is going to be the fastest path to electrification of passenger miles, I don't want this to happen. I don't want people to be protesting. I don't want them to be losing their jobs. I want us to make a transition plan that does it right and start today, because we don't have time for this. And we need to work towards integration and seamless connectivity. And I'm using, that's number 9, and I'm using that as a double entendre there because it's not just integration and connectivity of all the different vehicles, devices, bikes, trucks, cars, buses, whatever, but also of human beings. If we're going to digitize all of our transport sector, we need to make sure that the people, too, are connected to this. So, if I think about what are the foundations that these shared mobility principles bring, the foundations are zero emission and efficient use of resources, fair user fees, standard APIs, connected and integrated. If we do this, this is only to the good for today's transportation system. This will make our transportation system better. When we layer on top of that autonomous, we're going towards heaven. I feel so much more secure. And then number 10, which I didn't mention, is autonomous vehicles in dense metropolitan areas must be electric and shared. And I feel quite firm about that given the pricing strategies, the costs and our scarcity of our streets in urban areas. So key things to remember. These are the final points, and these are the key things. The transformed economics that autonomous vehicles bring means that where AVs drive really, really matters. So are you going to put those vehicles into a place where you don't have any road scarcity? Do you live in the countryside? And I've actually been thinking a lot about it now when I'm in the countryside. How will I feel in the countryside if, when I'm in some delightful bed and breakfast, enjoying country life, when there are cars going by, delivering my next door neighbor toothpaste one time, and then, shoelace the next time, and then, so even in rural areas, we might rethink this possibility, but in dense urban areas, they're already congested. We cannot allow this. We can't live with this kind of future. So any of our policies need to be very thoughtful about whether we're talking about autonomous vehicles in dense areas or rural areas. And so that's just the density for me around policy work is really critically important. We need to fix pricing. When I make this talk in front of car manufacturers or in front of people who are making autonomous vehicles, I want to say there are darts coming out of their eyes, trying to shoot me dead. Stop talking this way, Robin. You're ruining this industry before it's even started. And my reply is, which I'm giving to you so you can reply this way, self-driving or not, we've had 100 years of experience of what it looks like to have metal boxes on scarce streets. That situation is not changing, and that's the part we need to address. Let's start addressing what are the costs associated with moving metal boxes on scarce streets. We have to do it. So we don't have time for delay. And this is maybe the most important part of this talk. So this is a map of, is this year hotter or colder than the 20th century average? And I will point out to you that if you've been born since 1980, you have never experienced a cooler than average year from a planetary perspective. This was 2015, this was 2016, 2017, the numbers came out, it's just a tiny bit lower than 2016, but it was the first year without El Nino, so it was like an incredible number. And scientists are telling us that we'll have plus 5 or 6 degrees centigrade warmer with business as usual by 2100. If you were like me, you have no idea what does it feel like to warm a planet by 5 or 6 degrees Celsius. I have no idea. Oh, and I want to point out we've already warmed by close to 1 degree right now. So, my favorite slide isn't here, so I have to tell you. So the last time it was minus 4.5 degrees centigrade was the last ice age. And I think where we're standing in this room and where I sleep in my bed in Boston was under several kilometers of ice. So it took 20,000 years to go from Robin's bed under 2 kilometers of ice to today, and that was 4.5 degrees. And we were talking about going forward 5 or 6 degrees in 80 years. Clearly, we will be dead. Humans are very clever, so we might have a couple 100,000 doing some clever things up in the Antarctics and the poles. But the sense of urgency we have, I cannot make the case any stronger. We cannot go to this path, and we are going down this path. So, my new mission is to channel the tech-driven disruption in the mobility sector to rebuild cities that are sustainable, livable, and just. And what I want to challenge you guys today is I want you to be part of that team. We have this incredible opportunity that is phenomenal, that there's this tech-driven, completely disrupting, I feel it's like lava plates, where all the plates are moving. Everything you ever thought about your city is in flux. What we know for sure is it has to end with these shared multimodal cities. It has to end there. When a thing's cool, that's where we need to be. So a good friend of mine, and we're losing, I think, this just said, infrastructure is destiny. And she, this is Christiana Figueres, who ran the Unfccc for the Paris Agreement. And her sentence is, the infrastructure we are going to build over the next 3 years will determine the fate of humanity. So we can have this, which is what we have today, and we can have more of this, which is the Chongqing highway before, or we can have this. So we really, really, really have to get on this. And I think that's all I have to say. Thank you.